Namaskaram. Good morning. Welcome to episode number 142 of Daily Global Insights with Sree and Sree. Today is Thursday, the 15th of April, and here are the main points. More than 100 corporations, including Amazon, Apple, Ford Motors, Starbucks, Netflix, sign a letter opposing election integrity laws. Police officer Kim Potter, arrested over the fatal shooting of Daunte Wright, resigns and is being charged. Biden announces September 11th as Afghanistan withdrawal deadline and says it's time for troops to come home. US Army prepares for possible global land conflict with China over Taiwan. There shall not be lockdown, but there will be local level isolation. That's going to be India's strategy. In United States news, the New York Times says Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Weiss, who emerged Tuesday as the top bidder for the Tribune media company, has also created a group called the Hub Project to influence US elections through favorable media coverage for Democrats. More than 100 corporations, including Amazon, Apple, Ford Motors, Starbucks, Netflix, sign a letter opposing key election integrity laws. Ken Chenault, former CEO of Amex, and Ken Frazier, Merck and Company CEO, were responsible for the initiative that led to this statement. New York City sees some disillusioned Democrats switch to Republicans. So this thing about Stacey Abrams run thing in Georgia is now beginning to take a life of its own, sir.
It is. I think it's a very surprising development. Ken Chenault is one of the most reputed officers, former CEO of American Express. For him to have assembled together, along with Ken Frazier, 100 people, 100 CEOs, to talk about the election integrity laws. It bothers on two fronts. One is how deep and how far corporations are prepared to validate their perspective. And second, if this is the case, where does this begin and where does this end? So it does raise some questions around the integrity of the whole process and potential interference.
And in other news, Nancy Pelosi says she would have fought Capitol rioters. I am tough. I am a street fighter. If they had reached me, I will not be someone to mess around with. And 60 were arrested in Minnesota in the third night of riots after a police shooting of Daunte Wright. And police officer Kim Potter has been arrested over the fatal shooting of Daunte Wright. Rioters in Portland burned police union building after shooting of Daunte Wright. Jonathan Turley says Congress may have restrained Capitol Police to preserve false Lafayette Park narrative. And Capitol Police officer who killed a woman during the Jan 6th Capitol riots will not be charged, says Department of Justice. So we have two different incidences, similar action, but opposite consequences, sir.
Indeed. The Capitol Police officer who killed Ashley Babbitt, much well known, the person from the Army, Air Force, ex-Air Force lady who was in the Capitol Hill and she was shot. DOJ says that the police officer will not be charged. Kim Potter, she's 26 years in the police and who used the shotgun instead of the taser. She's going to be charged with manslaughter. So as you rightly point out, we need to hear more as to the reason and the rationale as to why two different interpretations have been made. And one may be, certainly the Capitol Police decision may be preventive and potential damage. So that could be the rationale that they would present. Nancy Pelosi getting into the action, saying that she was prepared to get into a fist fight and let not somebody. It's justice again. This is not something which is warranted in a potentially charged up climate. But who knows? These are all politicians. But what is also disconcerting is every time there's something in somewhere in Minnesota, Chicago, DC, these fellows in Portland seem to waiting for an opportunity to do something catastrophic. Well, they burned down a police union building, citing that as an excuse. As you know, in Minnesota itself, there's riots continuing, and arrests have been made, but it doesn't seem to have stopped. So this is notwithstanding the fact President Biden intervening and making a statement that arson and looting is not acceptable under any circumstances, let alone an incident of this for an incident of this nature.
And Kamala Harris plans a trip to Mexico and Guatemala, but not to the southern border. Sir, finally she has surfaced, but again, this role of her overseeing this border, happenings is not clear yet, isn't it?
I think it's a political curation. It's very clear she doesn't want to own up to this. Republican senators, including Democrats, members have visited. Department of Homeland Security has visited. Biden is even asking the Fed officials to go on paid leave to help in the border. But his own vice president wants to go to Guatemala and Mexico, but she doesn't want to go to the border. This is besides her 15, 16 days of absence ever since that was announced that she is tasked with overseeing it.
And House Democrats' majority has shrunk as Republican Julia Letlow from Louisiana is slated to be sworn in to office on Wednesday. That is today or yesterday. 218 to 212 is the majority that the Democrats have now. And if 3 or 4 switch to Republican on voting, it is game over, isn't it? There is no rule.
Well, I think Julia Letlow, as you probably know, her husband passed away due to COVID, and she contested the same seat, and she's reelected. To your point, in House, there is no filibuster. They have to have an absolute majority. So if few people flip over and join, then it's a no-show in terms of the outcome of any major initiative. So interesting times and interesting days ahead. There is a tie in the Senate with Vice President to break. There is a razor-thin majority in the House. As you rightly point out, few people flipping over is all that takes to put things into the back burner.
And IRS is on track to send $300 child tax credit payments in July. Republicans to offer $650 billion infrastructure plan to counter Biden's $2.2 trillion spending plan. And the Republicans will also not support the rollback of Trump tax cuts to fund Biden infrastructure plan. This is what Mitch McConnell has said. And Biden infrastructure plan aims to promote affordable housing in cities. And to add to all this, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy wants to give $40 million worth of stimulus payments to illegal immigrants. Biden rushes to protect power grids as hacking threats grow. We had covered this thing about what happened in India on October 11, 2020. And sir, your thoughts?
First and foremost, the IRS, issuing checks, and they're ready, they're organized. So $3,600 now, this is the additional payment, the child tax credits. It's $3,000 for those who are in the 6 to 16 and $3,600 those who are below 6. That's good news. The children need protection and the children needs augmentative support. So I think it's a good program which is directed towards the benefits of those checks are now going to go out. If you remember this universal basic income, so there's a number of basic components that seems to be lining up, and I think we are beginning to see the first cab of the rank, which is the child credit. So which is good. They are ready. Now Republicans have two or three. They have been opposing this infrastructure plan right from day one. They've always felt that this is a huge number, the 2.2 trillion. So they have proposed a $650 billion, which is effectively focused around the small business, some COVID support, and of course direct payments to unemployed and extending the unemployment insurance. Those are all as it relates to the cashing up the people. They are not supportive of money going to all these overseas corporations, overseas countries. They are neither supportive of the illegal immigrants being funded. So it's a good counter proposal. I doubt whether they're going to accept it because we covered it a couple of days ago. Democrats have outrightly rejected it.
And in global news, Biden announces September 11th as the date Afghanistan withdrawal deadline will be completed and says it's time for the troops to come home. And Senator Lindsey Graham rips Biden for reckless plan to withdraw troops from Afghanistan, says he has extended war, and there is a significant risk that once US troops pull out of Afghanistan, says Biden CIA director George Burns, I think it's Burns, I'm not sure if it's George or something else.
William Burns.
William Burns. And NATO allies also will be leaving at the same time from Afghanistan. So this is being set up for anarchy, if you ask me.
It is being set up for failure. The two prominent things here. One is this date, September 11th, sits stark in front of your eyes. The second, which is Mr. William Burns, the CIA director, making the statement. We have two issues. One, we will lose intelligence as to what's happening, and third, all the money that we have spent thus far, can go astray. Of course, the Republicans are steadfastly against it, and there is no mechanism in the place, as if one observes in Afghanistan, for the present government to defend itself. The question, therefore, is how long and how far one can continue to police and look after Afghanistan. So much should have been done, but progressive governments, both in EU as well as in United States, have failed to develop an alternative, and we could be again, facing a crisis emanating from there.
Sir, one thing that strikes me again and again, sir, it's now close to 2.5 months, or probably 2 months, and actually close to 2.5 months since the Biden administration assumed control. I have not heard a single statement from the chief of staff. And it's almost like, there's a laundry list that somebody is maintaining. Oh, this constituency, done, check. This constituency, done, check, 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 check. They're just going down this list of items. It's as if they're saying, okay, all these guys who are now seated in the new people seated in Congress, and Republicans as well as Democrats are getting their breath back before they actually get up their head and look at what's going on. We're going to pass all these things. That's how it looks to me.
Your assessment is spot on. Your observations are absolutely correct. With regard to the question that you have raised, they have made the press secretary, White House press secretary, to be the front end, and she goes flip-flop every day. Given that we are inundated and flooded with liberal media in the mainstream media, well anchored and supported by the tech platforms, and of course, the narratives being spun around by the left-wing broadcast channels, anything works. So therefore, there's no mechanism for any of these things to come out in terms of your observations. So the reason they come up with a strategy, less exposure, less visibility, less talk, means no damage. That seems to be the strategy, while this checklist that you're referring to seems to be the modus operandi of the Biden administration.
And again, if somebody is a press statement, it can always be walked back. Whereas if the chief of staff were to say something, then, he can be held to account for what he said. So I guess you're absolutely right there. And ahead of the Suga-Biden meeting, Japan briefs United States on Tencent Rakuten ties. Security, the dominant topic 27 years later at the summit. This is the Suga-Biden summit. Sir, what is this Rakuten Tencent tie? Tencent is a Chinese company, I know that.
$2.2 billion of capital was raised by Rakuten most recently. There were three lead investors: Japan Post, Walmart, and Tencent. They were the investors, and the Rakuten strategy is to broadly develop its mobile carrier business, logistics, as well as replicate the cash payment service that Tencent has in China. So they want to learn best practices, etc. Of course, they're looking for capital. If you take away the issues, most recent controversial issues from South China Sea, right up to Biden takeover and running the new administration, while there has been occasional scaling down, and then of course the confrontation occurred, in the last 12 months of Trump administration, and Chinese companies, where Japanese and Korean companies started to migrate out of China. But having said that, prior to that, or leading up to that, there's been significant investments on either side. So he's going to explain to him that any of the stuff that is being done will not go into the wrong hands of Chinese companies or Chinese corporations, because especially if it is around the development of the carrier business, you have chips and so on. So he wants to make sure that he gets the message that Japan will play by the rules of United States. It is an investment decision.
I beg your pardon there. In China news, China has a threat, an unparalleled priority for U.S. intelligence community, say spy chiefs. The CCP is using political warfare to fight unseen war on Taiwan. Taiwan says its chip firms will adhere to the US rules banning chip availability to Chinese supercomputing entities, and unofficial US delegation lands in Taiwan amidst tension with China. So now it looks like the US Army is preparing for a possible global land conflict with China, sir.
We covered 2 days ago that Mike Pompeo is likely to visit, that there is a Chinese US Army personnel on ground looking at the logistics and the state of preparedness, also the maintenance of some of their tanks on ground. So it's very clear that the US generals have been saying that the Taiwan war will be on land, not just purely on air. So United States must be prepared to combat. The fact that there's an unofficial delegation going to Taiwan for discussions, etc., and there's also this proxy war that China has launched, is a reflection of almost an imminent threat, and something can flip in the Taiwan situation. China is as emotive about Taiwan as much as United States, Taiwan, and Japan. In fact, Japan was the first one which raised the flag that any invasion of Taiwan is a red flag, can have major consequences in the region.
And Australia has rejected a Chinese-funded research program that runs into millions of dollars in the interest of the nation. Your thoughts, sir?
I think it's a commendable effort by ANU, and that they have refused to take funding, recognizing that it can put them potentially into a conflict course. I think I think we mentioned this before, Scott Morrison has taken a very effective leadership role in positioning and making the stands of the Australia and the Australian people very clear. Until recently, there was considerable integration and sympathy. I'm not suggesting it's not the case. People to people in Australia, there's a lot of mainland Chinese people who are married, well settled, integrated into the Australian ecosystem. But the COVID has flipped the whole thing topsy-turvy. That's one. There's also been security concern and issues, because sometimes these loose statements coming from the CCP leadership have certainly stirred the hornet's nest in the minds of the Australian people that Australia is not for sale.
And Vietnam's mediation diplomacy faces a key test in Myanmar, and Myanmar is collapsing into a crisis. Sir, this is now into its 6th or 7th week, or probably even longer. Where do you think things are headed, sir?
Where I think Myanmar's army will win. There will be brutal put down of the rebels. This is not a strategic priority for the world community. They are giving a lip service in terms of dealing with it. Into the potpourri is China and Russia. The latest breaking news is Russian planes and helicopters being used by the junta to bomb some of these rebel territories. So when you have Russia and China deep into managing Myanmar and ASEAN using diplomacy to resolve it, they're going to allow it to run its course. The winner takes it all. And that's going to be the junta. And there will be a junta appointed, democratically elected government. And
Selected,
so they
yeah.
yeah, selected. And I think they plan to conduct an election, sir.
Again.
Myanmar, the junta plan to conduct an elections at some appropriate time. And they don't believe that the previous election, which was Aung Suu Kyi won, they don't believe that to be legitimate, and which is where we are today. So I think how they're going to do all this, we don't know. Certainly Indonesia, Malaysia, to some extent Thailand are leading the diplomatic efforts to see whether there's some kind of an impasse and a resolution rather than this brutal force, without upsetting any apple cart by way of saying, okay, we're not going to interfere in what you do, but let's just calm things down, because it's not putting up a good face for the ASEAN.
And Guatemala says that there is no deal with the United States on increased border security. This is significant. So whatever statements that the Biden government is making, that they are going to try and halt the progress of these caravans, is just that, empty talk.
This is yet another embarrassment to the Biden administration. Biden administration issues a statement, and then immediately one day later, then you have a counter statement from the respective country. So they have much talked about funding some of the Central American countries and talking to them in terms of security, and then you have Guatemala coming out and making a statement. I just want to add one more, though, which is not the Iran situation, and then we wrap up the global news. The Iranian religious leader right now, as the discussions are going on, he has issued a statement that he doesn't want to do anything with Biden. He feels that the Biden administration is loose talk, right? This is notwithstanding the fact Biden administration imposed itself into the discussions at the request of the EU. So that's another example of small nations standing up and telling the present regime here in US, we don't care what you say, we don't want you, we don't want you, we don't want to be talking to you.
Yeah, that one is really strange how that has flip-flop back and forth. And in India-related news, there shall not be a lockdown, but there will be a local level isolation. This is the new strategy that India is adopting, sir.
Look, I think if I use United States as an example, where this national lockdown was prevented in this, whatever, second, third, fourth wave that's going on. Take the case of Texas, take the case of Florida, take the case of, what's the other state? Even for that matter, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, some of those states, they have tried to identify areas where there is propensic propagation of COVID and impose additional measures like red zone, yellow zone, green zone. These zones are fine, rather than a national clampdown, which is unilateral, making other people, go through when they're not impacted. It seems to have paid off. For example, Florida seems to be limping back to normal. Texas seems to be limping back to normal until this crisis that emerged more recently because of these illegal immigrants coming in. I hope the strategy will be executed appropriately and they can move forward.
And in other news, Taiwanese chipmaker MediaTek launches 7 nanometer Dimensity 700 5G chipsets into India. Sir, are you sure it is 7 nanometer process? Because that is I worked in this technology. Even getting to 10 nanometers was a big huff and puff.
It is 7 nanometers, sir. I will share the link to you. I went through the details. And so my objective was to point out that semiconductor is coming to India. I think that's the headline. They seem to be advancing rather than using old technology. Clearly, 5G is one of the domains that India is also focusing on and want to have an R&D and developmental capability. Yep.
And indicating growing adoption of Ayurveda, public sector manufacturer of Ayush medicines has posted a record turnover, sir. I use Ayurveda wherever I can. I don't know about you, sir.
I use Ayurveda. We use Ayurveda. It's an endemic part of our live stream. It's been very effective, very, very, very effective in mitigating number of things. It is a defensive as well as an effective antibody immunity booster. It's not a cure. People have to be very careful. It treats using your body. The good news is, right through the COVID crisis, I hear, talking to some of my, this kashayas and other kind of potions has been used by even the traditional hospitals as augmentative to the conventional protocols, medicinal protocols that has been used. So it's good that whatever is the indigenous medicine that has worked for centuries is back on the horizon and being well accepted by the community.
And in the pharma sector, approvals accorded under PLI scheme for close to 348 crores of investment in drug intermediates and APIs. This is active pharmaceutical ingredients. So this is very good news as far as the pharma sector is concerned, sir. India is trying to come back and do its own APIs.
They are doing their own, they plan to do their own APIs. They probably have selected a couple of schemes. One of them is obviously the COVID treatment protocol. They recognize that they cannot be reliant on the foreign manufacturers or foreign biotech companies using India as a manufacturing hub. Now, Russia is subcontracted close to 850 million Sputnik 5 vaccines to be produced in India. But I'm not sure whether Pfizer BioNTech, as well as Moderna, I don't even know whether Moderna is available. Only AstraZeneca variant, which is Covishield, is available in India. So the API investment is pretty good in terms of coming up with alternative COVID protocols, especially. And now they also have, remedies where they've stopped exporting. With rising cases, India requires its in-house or internal capabilities to tackle its problems.
And employment in India has a long way to go, but on the way to recovery, according to Monster Employment Index study. Your thoughts are, because now, again, Mumbai is going through a lockdown, which is a local lockdown.
The Monster Study Index, they have conducted survey of not only the MSME companies, but also broad industry, across the broad industries, to see what the employment demand looks like in the outer months. The study points out that, of course, nobody can predict what exactly the situation that's going to come out of the COVID, but based on the current data and current trends, there is a demand for more employment, especially as the services sector comes out. The manufacturing sector, for perhaps automation, perhaps self-contained, isolated, whatever the reasons, we have reported already the manufacturing sector seems to be, well organized and well geared, and there is a growth, especially in the exports. Okay, but as far as the services and the MSME, they have suffered the brunt of it, and which is where the unemployment has been very high. And as even PGurus has reported the challenge of unemployment in India as a result of this unstable state that India is in, and this migrant temporary labor, which form the bulk of employment in several of the states, moving forward, backward, etc. But the study is very clear, which is to say, based on studying, talking to some of the vast number of people, the demand for recruiting is there, and that augurs well for India. But there's still a long way to go to come out of the mess that the world is left with as a result of COVID.
Yes, and you segued nicely into COVID. That's what we are going to cover next. Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State, says that he's ecstatic that the world is beginning to see the role of China in the pandemic.
Well, I think these relentless pressures on Uyghurs, and now at last the world has woken up. It should have been the other way. The first and topmost priority should be the China to be made accountable for a global health, financial, and economic mess as a result of this. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, whom everybody knows, who comes on CNN, less than a week ago, on CNN, he has made a statement. There's enough indication that this thing has come out of Wuhan. That's not a light statement by one of these persons who goes around the world dealing with a number of health issues. But the world kept quiet, has been very passive. And so Pompeo is saying, at last, and remember, it was Trump who said it's China virus. It's not COVID, it's China virus. So he was quite emphatic, but it began to taper off once the new regime came in. But now it's back on the agenda. It's important that there is some element of accountability and whatever, a statement of record or something in United Nations. Otherwise, UN has no purpose for existence. Recognizing and making it very clear. Even the WHO work that was done in Wuhan and other places was a complete wish-wash and stage managed by the Chinese.
And speaking of Trump and Mike Pompeo, may I also remind viewers that there has been snippets of video doing the rounds of a CNN technical director laying out CNN strategy for the last few years that they wanted to ensure that Trump would not come back, and the extent to which they went. This is just shocking watching it when you see that CNN's own technical director. I think this was some sort of a sting. I don't know exactly the origins, but I've seen enough times that thing to tell me that there was a clear-cut strategy. News has already taken a backseat. Viewers, please spread the word about what we are trying to do. Sridharji and I are committed to telling you news based on data. This data is something that government organizations put out or reliable organizations, private organizations put out who have a track record of giving accurate data. Therefore, we are not taking sides, but what we are telling you is exactly what is playing out in the world. And moving on in COVID news, Moderna eyes combo COVID-19 flu vaccine. For those of you who don't live in the United States, there is a flu season that starts around beginning of fall, like August, September, and by October it is expected that everybody get their flu shots so that they can withstand any flu instances over the Christmas holidays and Thanksgiving holidays. Now, Moderna is trying to combine the COVID vaccine along with flu so that instead of getting two shots, you will get a single shot. That's a good idea, isn't it, sir?
It is a good idea. It delivers two messages to us. One is that COVID is going to be here with us forever, and it will become a seasonal ritual that we need to take a vaccine to, because remember, these antibodies are not lifelong. They have a duration. Some people say 6 months, some people say 12 months, some people say you may need a booster dose, etc. So that's the first message. Second, we'll integrate it probably with flu, so you don't need to take two vaccines, you take one vaccine. So that's the takeaway from this, that this is not going to go away. This is a permanent affair.
And Pfizer BioNTech vaccine arrives in China as China makes available imported vaccine for the first time. Is this an admission on their part that now their vaccine is going nowhere?
China never admits that. China will never admit ever that it is wrong. So therefore, it says we are also global citizens. We're also globally integrated. So we want to be a good Samaritan. And so, we have worked with Pfizer and we are bringing their vaccines. Whether they have any other agenda, we don't know. But certainly the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine seems to have arrived. And remember, BioNTech is German. So they have a very good collaboration with Germany.
And Denmark drops AstraZeneca vaccine amidst rising clots issue. And here's the other interesting thing. I'll give you a chance to respond, sir. CDC makes no decision on the J&J and the pause to hold. Before we continue, I just want to set the context here. Viewers, there are 6 instances of things going awry with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in a set of 6 million people who have been vaccinated. Of the 6, one person has died. The others have recovered. Maybe 1 or 2 are critical. That is the reason why Florida's governor, Donald Trump, have expressed this question. So what is the big hurry? Because if you look at the numbers, it doesn't seem to make sense. So your thoughts?
My thoughts are, it's just intriguing. Dr. Fauci made a press statement. The decision behind the pause and the hold on J&J is science, not anything else. If 6 in 6 million is a reflective of a pause, then none of the vaccines that are today in practice can be on field. None. Because the data is infinitely small for it to be material. Now, what exactly are the reasons that made them hold? We don't know. There could be other things. Manufacturing issues, could be some of the vaccines that are there. You remember the Maryland factory issue, etc., etc. There could be other things. But clearly we don't know the truth. But certainly, as you make the case, and as we talked about it, 6 in 6 million, and especially in Florida, they want the J&J vaccine. Texas, they want the J&J vaccine. And to pause and to deny one significant vaccine is not, doesn't sound good. Doesn't sound right, not good, doesn't sound right.
And in other vaccine-related news, 142 fully vaccinated people test positive in Houston, and we have seen this thing. I mean, our own Sree Chityalaji had a occurrence of COVID after he took the vaccine.
Indeed, sir. Indeed, I think on the 14th, 12th, between 12th and 14th day, I developed symptoms. Both me and my wife, we took on the same day, both of us. She had a milder version. I have some health complications that put me into a very complicated set of issues. But there's enough data today to address the issues through hospitalization and IV protocols. One of those protocols that was used on me was remdesivir. Besides blood thinners and antibiotics and steroids and so on and so forth, and magnesium to protect the outer layer of the heart. So there's enough data and enough availability to deal with the situation. The main message from here is most of the urbane city, well-equipped hospitals are well organized to deal with this. The sad and unfortunate truth is most of the district level, hospitals, local hospitals in remote areas, they don't have the facilities, nor they have the data available by way of research and collection of data to deal with issues. That's the reason why we had such high fatalities in the United States. I will not be surprised if something similar is clearly this was the case in Europe. In Europe, they had no beds. They couldn't take the patients. They can't even treat them. So that was a problem in Europe. I'm assuming something similar of that ilk in India as well as the cases rise. And the other important factor is the oxygen dispensation by your lungs is very critical. And as a first step, they give you augmented oxygen through nasal. And notwithstanding the fact you may be the clearance may be at the right level, but they don't take chance. So these are all the protocols that help to overcome. And these 142 vaccinated people testing positive is no surprise at all, because the antibodies as they develop, I gather, can create some, issues until it is fully integrated, and that may take about 6 months.
And I might tell viewers that while he was going through this process, Sridharji was extremely active. We were in correspondence almost every day. He would contribute to giving me news items. I was reading the news line items, but he was in the back end. I knew every day that there was something going on, there was progress. And I mean, with all the best wishes from you viewers, I really, really thank you from the bottom of my heart, because Sridhar ji was also reading all the comments that were coming on the YouTube channel. So thank you very much. And we will continue to do this thing. And it's our pleasure to give you this news. Again, I have to emphasize this. We are just telling you as we see it, as we get the data, and our data is very accurate. If any of you think that we are getting something which is tilting towards one party or the other, we certainly encourage someone to come and give us the opposite data. We will take a very careful look at it, and if we find it right, we will be talking about it. And moving on, India is going to produce 850 million doses of Sputnik 5 vaccine annually. So now Russia is also looking to India to produce the vaccines for them.
Yes, I think this is a historical association that India and Russia has had. Russia has no other place to go. It comes to India, and that's a significant amount of volume to come out as part of the process that they have given the rights to use the Sputnik 5. So India will now have three, Covishield, Covaxin, and Sputnik 5 available for use and domestic consumption.
And India's Cipla is going to scale up remdesivir production twofold by 100% to meet unprecedented demand for the drug. And COVID cases continue to rise in states like Rajasthan, Delhi, and Maharashtra, with 200,000 cases every day. Yes, yesterday that was the first time that I think in India you had 2 lakh cases reporting COVID, sir.
Indeed, the variants have come in. India is an unusual case. I go back to last year, and in the middle, when people were complaining, Trump made a statement. Look, India is a large country and a huge population. Enough testing had not been done. And yes, they had done a good job, but that didn't mean that they have done an exhaustive testing for us to look at the real numbers. Some of these numbers could be as a result of, I gather, that the rate of testing in India today is much, much, much higher relative to what it was. So it is possible some of these latent cases are now beginning to emerge. And once you have determined that he is COVID, it needs to be dispensed with. As far as some of these states that are, for example, Maharashtra and Delhi, Maharashtra is supposed to be either 40, I mean, some numbers tell me 60, some numbers tell me 40, 45% of this is concentrated in one state. When you take 3 or 4 states, almost 70% of that seems to be concentrated in those in those states. So these numbers seems to be emblematic of location, and whether it is to do with their habits, discipline, and free movement, and not being careful and cautious, don't know. But India's rising cases and how it deals with it is something that we'll know as time goes on. I'm sure that with vaccines and other data available, they will combat it.
And viewers, in markets, we had told you that Coinbase intends to price their offering at $250 per share. Yesterday, when it went public, Coinbase closed at $328.8 per share, in valuing the exchange at $85.8 billion. All this for a series of digits, sir.
Indeed. The reference price was $350. Sree, Iyer, you asked me, what do I think it will be? I said the market will determine the price. The fact that the price range was 350 seems to be on the dot. It went up to 380, 385 in the first opening moments of the trade, taking the valuation to close to $100 billion. And it eventually settled at 328, making up this $85, $86 billion valuation. Look, the cryptos are here, and they are, whether it's like
antiques and artifacts and so on. It may have some trading value. It may have limited purpose, just as Tesla said it is going to buy, and it may allow people to pay with it. It may be very selected closed loop usage as a commercial, but much of its value seems to stem from as a commodity, like gold. At least gold is used, but there's a lot of people who buy gold and keep it, and as a place to go to in the event of a monetary crisis.
And Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan earnings are temporarily driving the markets, and Powell suggests that it will follow the 2013-14 playbook when it starts to taper its asset purchases. This is basically what they're saying is they're going to repeat the same strategy that you used. And Treasury yield, sir, I'll let you answer in just 1 second, sir. Treasury yields edge higher on the back of comments from Powell on Fed purchases. So maybe you can wrap up what this strategy here is, sir.
Very simple. Sorry, I wanted to say that as the market begins to recover, they will begin to hold and stop the purchases of releasing additional liquidity into the market. So they will taper it down. It's already, I think, between 85 billion against a target of 120. The 120 billion was set up basically as a mechanism in the case corporates require liquidity. So they're going to use the same policy. That basically implied they are watching inflation. So that's the message Jerome Powell delivered to the markets.
And markets are flat after a record uptick on record earnings day yesterday. And today, I think the futures are slightly up. Maybe you can wrap up that. And viewers, always on the ticker, you can see the latest movements of price. For example, the crude or the Bitcoin price and so on and so forth. Sree, perhaps you can wrap up how you see markets going today, because now we are in the middle of earnings season, and then we can call it a wrap.
Markets will continue to get driven by the earnings. A few companies come up and say it was stellar, demand is picking up, the forward forecast looks pretty good. Then you see the markets, the buoyancy in the markets. How do I see it today? You're not going to see 300, 400, 500 point rise, but you will continue to see, rises in, less than 1%, 0.5 to 1% rises, unless there is a blowout. All these indices are already well on their way, are pretty close to end of year projection levels. So therefore, we are already on the threshold on the back of very positive momentum that has occurred. And there is also very positive momentum around the Biden's plan of putting cash into the pockets. There's one number that I will give you. JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, in his results, he made a very compelling revelation. There's close to $2 trillion of money in the checking accounts of JP Morgan. 2 trillion. That's, checking account is what you use to pay for all your bills and expenses. So he's saying the consumers are waiting to, push this money into the system. So hence he thinks that the markets are well poised and the economy is well poised.
And that brings us to a close on today's Hangout, perhaps one of the longer ones. We had thought it will take us longer than what it did, but I think Sridharji has very crisply detailed all the developments that have happened in the last 24 hours. As always, it's a pleasure to have you on our channel, sir. Viewers, please spread the word, subscribe to our channel, donate to our cause, join our club, and as always, we'll be back tomorrow bright and early. Namaskar.
Namaskar, and thank you so much.